All right, how's everybody doing? Hotep. Hey, this is Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network, host of the African History Network show. I'm a talk show host, researcher, lecturer, and writer. It is Monday, December 31st, 2018. It's the last day of the year and the sixth day of Kwanzaa, Kuumba, which means creativity. So I hope everybody's doing well. So I wanted to talk some more about Kwanzaa. You know, I did a broadcast a few days ago, but I wanted to talk some more about Kwanzaa, the history of Kwanzaa. And I wanted to talk about the fourth principle of Kwanzaa, which is Ujamaa, okay, which is cooperative economics. And I was speaking at the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History on the second day of Kwanzaa, which is Thursday, December 27th, for Kujichagulia, self-determination, the third day of Kwanzaa. And then Saturday, December 29th, I was speaking at Burt's Warehouse for the for the Kwanzaa Detroit Entrepreneur Workshop that the People's Coalition put on. Brother Negasavu heads that up. And I dealt with Ujamaa and cooperative economics, and I dealt with some of the history of African-American co-ops, some of the history of African-American co-ops. And that is a history that a lot of people don't know about, okay? So we're gonna talk some about that and deal with some of the traditional African first fruit harvest festivals that Kwanzaa is based upon. Okay, and I want to let you all know, first of all, share this broadcast on your Facebook page and on YouTube, and let your friends know to tune in. All right, and then also those in the Detroit area, I'll be back at the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History on Tuesday, January 1st, 2019. Okay, so New Year's Day, for the last day of Kwanzaa, which is Imani, which means faith. It's taking place 3 p.m. to 6 p.m., Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History. And the last day is organized and sponsored by the Shrine of the Black Madonna. Okay, so it's always good with the Shrine of the Black Madonna when they do their Kwanzaa celebrations. And so come on out, bring the families, family oriented. There'll be African dance and drumming and edutainment. They'll have speakers, and there's also an African marketplace. So I'll have a vendor table in the African marketplace. Okay, so you come see me. We'll have our DVD lectures there, and you can meet me, ask questions, etc. Okay, so that's Tuesday, January 1st, 2019. We have to get used to saying 2019, 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. And visit theright.org for more information, theright.org for more information, okay? So I want to say Heri za Kwanzaa to everybody, which means happy Kwanzaa. And Habaragani, which means what's the news. Today's principle is Kuumba, which means creativity, okay, the sixth day of Kwanzaa. But I want to talk some about Ujamaa, cooperative economics, Ujamaa, cooperative economics, all right? I want to do a little bit with some of the history of Kwanzaa as well, okay? And this is something I break down in a lot of my Kwanzaa presentations. Also want to let you know we have a new presentation on DVD and digital download. Is 4 of my Kwanzaa presentations, and includes the one I did at the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History, Thursday, December 27th, 2018, from Kwanzaa to Wakanda, reconnecting African Americans to African culture for self-empowerment, from Kwanzaa to Wakanda, reconnecting African Americans to African culture for self-empowerment. And then also the one I did this past Saturday dealing with cooperative economics, and my Kwanzaa presentation from 2017 and 2016. So there are 4 presentations on this DVD. It's on sale $10. We have it on digital download also, okay? All right, so let me bring this up because I want to deal with briefly some of the history of Kwanzaa as well. So I'll show you a few of these slides also. All right, so Kwanzaa is an African American and Pan-African cultural holiday. It's not a religious holiday, okay? You can belong to any religion and celebrate Kwanzaa. And Kwanzaa celebrates family, community, and culture. Family, community, and culture. All right, and let me turn the share on so you can see this also. All right. So Kwanzaa celebrates family, community, and culture. Okay. And with Kwanzaa also, there's a focus on children and make sure we get this information to our children also. All right, let's see here. Okay, so and this year, so my presentation on Thursday, December 27th at the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History, I dealt with some of the history of Kwanzaa, which was founded in 1966. And I also dealt with the film Black Panther because both Kwanzaa and the film Black Panther help African Americans to reconnect to African history and culture. All right. So, people's history and culture teaches them how to deal with the problems of the past in the present and the future to meet the needs of the community. A people's history and culture teaches them how to deal with the problems of the past in the present and the future to meet the needs of the community. And when we look at the movie Black Panther, and we saw the ritual combat at the beginning of the movie, we saw T'Challa fighting M'Baku, okay, of the Jabari tribe, and they're fighting at Warrior Falls, with the waterfall where that ritual combat takes place. That's called Warrior Falls. And when we saw African martial arts displayed, we saw ground fighting, we saw them fighting with weapons, we saw grappling. And the first martial arts known to man, the first fighting systems known to man, come out of Africa. Okay, martial arts did not originate in China. Martial arts didn't start with the Shaolin monks or things like this. Martial arts starts in Africa. So we see them engaging in the ground fighting. All right. And then we see when T'Challa is losing, his stepmother, Ramonda, played by Angela Bassett, says, "Show him who you are." She screams out, "Show him who you are." All right. So then T'Challa headbutts him and hits him with an elbow and gets him on the ground. They go to ground fighting. And then he gets him in a stranglehold, a triangular choke, a version of a triangular choke, trapping his arm also, right? And forces a submission. So before you can show them who you are, you have to know who you are, right? Before you can show them who you are, you have to know who you are. So this is why the African history and culture is so important, because this influences, our history and culture gives us our VIPs, our values, our interests, and our principles. Our values, our interests, and our principles, okay? All right, so I want to make sure that, okay, so the slide was showing. Okay, good. All right, so when we look at some of the history of Kwanzaa, and I'll bring up this slide again quickly here. When we look at some of the history of Kwanzaa, we see that Kwanzaa was created in 1966, all right, by Dr. Maulana Karenga and members of organization US. Okay, so it wasn't Dr. Karenga by himself. It was Dr. Maulana Karenga and members of organization US. But also we see that the Black Panther character was created in 1966 as well. Okay, and a lot of people don't know this. The Black Panther character was created in 1966 also. And let me flip back over to just a second. Let me flip back over to this slide. All right, so Kwanzaa is an African-American and Pan-African cultural holiday, not religious holiday. And it celebrates family, community, and culture. Family, community, and culture. And you can belong to any religion, okay, and celebrate Kwanzaa, all right? Or you may not subscribe to a particular religion. Now, it's celebrated December 26th through January the 1st, December 26th through January the 1st. And one of the reasons also was because of the first fruit harvest festival called Umkosi, which I'll talk about in a minute, which is celebrated towards the end of the year around that period of time. And that's coming from the Zulu. Also, there was a festival in ancient Kemet called Pert M Men, okay, the coming forth of men, and that was celebrated toward the end of the year also. All right, so the name Kwanzaa comes from the Kiswahili phrase Matunda ya Kwanzaa, which means first fruits, okay? Matunda ya Kwanzaa. And its origins are in the first fruit harvest celebrations of Africa, from which it takes its name. Now, Kiswahili, you'll hear the word Swahili, but it's actually Kiswahili, is a Pan-African language, which is the most widely spoken African language. It's spoken in, I've seen one estimate of spoken by about 50 million people, all right? Now, Kwanzaa is celebrated by as many as 20 million people around the world, and it's celebrated internationally. It's celebrated in various countries and islands throughout the diaspora as well, because members of organization US took Kwanzaa internationally, okay? Even while Maulana Karenga was in prison, you have members of organization US who took Kwanzaa internationally. I talked to a brother who was a longtime member of organization US, with Facebook friends, and he was telling me some of this history a couple of days ago. So now Kiswahili is also a Bantu language as well. Okay, and we'll talk about Bantu languages just a minute, because Wakanda, and some of you have heard me talk about this before, even though Wakanda is a fictitious place, Wakanda is not a made-up word. Wakanda is a Bantu word also. Wakanda is a real word, and we find it in Native American languages as well. All right, so Kiswahili is a Pan-African language, which is the most widely spoken African language on the continent of Africa, and is spoken by at least 50 million people. There are an estimated 900 to 1,500 different languages spoken in Africa, and some estimates put it at right around 2,000 different languages spoken on the continent of Africa. But many distinct political units share a common or similar language, as among the Yoruba or the Hausa in Nigeria, and Swahili speaking peoples also, okay? All right, so when we look at some of the origins of Kwanzaa, first fruit celebrations have taken place in African history going back to ancient Kemet, Kemet being one of the original names for Egypt, Kemet meaning the land of the blacks, and Ta-Nehisi or Ta-Seti, or what was called Nubia. Now, Nubia is a Greek word, when the correct names would be Ta-Seti or Ta-Nehisi. First fruit celebrations occur in ancient and modern African civilizations, such as among the Ashanti of Ghana and the Yoruba of Nigeria. We can also find first fruit celebrations in large African empires, like among the Zulu or the Amazulu of South Africa. And for South Africa, you may see the name Azania Mawini Mutapa. Okay, Azania Mawini Mutapa. You may see that, which is one of the original names also. And we also see it among smaller societies in Southeastern Africa, like among the Matabele and the Thonga and the Levedu. In Kemet, and let me pull up this slide here also. Let's see here. Let's go back to the slide so you can see some of this. This is some of the presentation I delivered for Kwanzaa. All right, so I was speaking on the second day of Kwanzaa, on December 27th, which is Kujichagulia, self-determination, Kiswahili word. And this is one of the 7 principles of the Nguzo Saba. But the self-determination, as it pertains to Kwanzaa and the Nguzo Saba, means to define ourselves, name ourselves, create for ourselves, and speak for ourselves. And as Dr. Wade Nobles teaches us, power is the ability to define and shape reality, and to have other people accept your definition of reality as if it were their own. Power is the ability to define and shape reality, and to have other people accept your definition of reality as if it were their own, okay? So as I said before, Kwanzaa was created in 1966 by Dr. Maulana Karenga, members of the organization US. In the midst of the Black freedom movement, it reflects a concern for cultural groundedness in thought and practice. Kwanzaa was created to serve multiple purposes and to address specific problems that African people were dealing with in America in 1966. So there were members of organization US that helped to create Kwanzaa also. All right. So when I do my presentations, you know, I honor and respect those members of organization US that help to create Kwanzaa and promote it as well, and promote it internationally also. All right. And Dr. Karenga is the chair and a professor of Africana Studies at California State University in Long Beach. He holds 2 PhDs. Okay, so visit the official Kwanzaa website, officialkwanzaawebsite.com, for more information and information about the Nguzo Saba and some of the details of Kwanzaa, official Kwanzaa website.com. And I encourage people also to read Dr. Karenga's book, The African American Holiday of Kwanzaa, The African American Holiday of Kwanzaa, okay? And it's a really, really good book. It goes deep into the history of Kwanzaa. It goes deep into the history of the traditional African continental or continental African traditional first fruit harvest festivals that Kwanzaa is based upon. Okay, because a lot of people say, oh, Kwanzaa is a made-up holiday, you know, what have you. Well, all the holidays are made-up holidays. Everything from Christmas to Easter to Valentine's Day to the 4th of July. You know, I talk about this this book here from Dr. Ishaka Musa Barashango, African People and European Holidays of Mental Genocide, Volume 1, Book 1 and Book 2. This is Book 2. Book 1 is around here somewhere. I can't find it. But all the holidays are made up holidays, okay? But the traditions that Kwanzaa is based upon, right, are older than a lot of the traditions that a lot of these European holidays are based upon that we've been taught to celebrate. But we don't understand the history of a lot of these European holidays, and we don't understand the history of Kwanzaa and the traditional African first fruit harvest festivals that is based upon. So we'll say crazy things like that. All right, so that's it. So his book is a really, really good book, The African American Holiday of Kwanzaa, a celebration of family, community, and culture. All right, let me let's see. Let's try to flip back here to the slide. Okay, so if we look at quickly here, what are first fruit celebrations, right? Now, first fruit celebrations have taken place in African history going back to ancient Kemet and ancient Nubia. First fruit celebrations occur in ancient and modern civilizations, such as among the Ashanti of Ghana and Yoruba of Nigeria. And check out pages 16 through 17 of the African American Holiday of Kwanzaa, a celebration of family, community, and culture, for some of this specific information. Now, Kwanzaa builds on the 5 fundamental activities of continental African first fruit celebration. So a lot of people know about the Nguzo Saba, but there are 5 fundamental activities of traditional African first fruit harvest festivals, okay? And they are ingathering, reverence, commemoration, recommitment, and celebration. Ingathering, reverence, commemoration, recommitment, and celebration. So when we look at ingathering, okay, that's a time of coming together or ingathering among the people to reaffirm the bonds between them. When we look at commemoration, a time of commemoration of the past in pursuit of its lessons and in honor of its models of human excellence, our ancestors. When we look at celebration, you know, Dr. Ishaka Musa Barashango, who wrote African People and European Holidays, A Mental Genocide, Book 1 and Book 2. I have some of his lectures. Minister Malik Shabazz in Detroit, that was one of his teachers. And, you know, he introduced me to Dr. Ishaka Musa Barashango, to like his lectures. I've never met him before. He was an ancestor, so I didn't get a chance to meet him. But through Minister Malik Shabazz, I was exposed to Dr. Ishaka Musa Barashango and a lot of his teachings. And then I read these 2 books of his. And he talked about how, Dr. Barashango talked about how in traditional African societies, African people spent about 1/4 to 1/3 of the year in celebration, because we practice Ujamaa, the 3rd principle of Kwanzaa, which means collective work and responsibility. So we work together to get the work done, so we had time for the celebration, okay? And then also, you've heard me talk about Dr. David Imhotep, who wrote the book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence. So these two are cousins. That Dr. David Imhotep told me, Dr. Barashango is one of his cousins, or was one of his cousins. He's an ancestor now. So Dr. David Imhotep, I've been telling you, his new book is coming out soon. He emailed me, he emailed me today, actually. He emailed me today. He said his new book is coming out the end of February 2019. The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence Revisited. The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence Revisited. He said it's going to be about 460 pages. He has a whole lot more information because this book deals with the African presence in this country going back at least 51,700 years that we call the United States of America. South America going back at least 56,000 years. But because of new discoveries, he'll go back probably about 100,000 years. And this was our land stolen from us. We were here in this land that we call the United States of America for tens of thousands of years. We were here before Native Americans came into existence. We were here before European settlers, okay? And he said his new book will have about 1,000 footnotes. Now, this one right here is out of print. You may be able to get it from African-American book dealers because on Amazon it's about $300-400, okay? But this one has 713 footnotes. He said his new book will have about 1,000 footnotes and it'll be about 460 pages, okay? So look out for that. And I'm gonna try to bring them back to Detroit so we can do a double lecture and maybe do some presentations in other cities as well, all right? But his book is groundbreaking. And he talks about how he stands on the shoulders of Dr. Ivan Van Sertima, who wrote the book, They Came Before Columbus. And They Came Before Columbus came out in 1976. Well, there have been tons of new discoveries and new cutting edge papers, new archaeological discoveries, right? So there's more and more evidence of an African presence in South America and North America, going back tens of thousands of years before Native Americans come into existence. Okay, so in my presentations, and those that saw my presentations in Detroit at the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History, I referenced Dr. David Imhotep as well, because when we study the transatlantic slave trade, it's important for us to study the transatlantic slave trade. And I teach online courses dealing with the transatlantic slave trade. But when we study the transatlantic slave trade, we have to put it in historical context. We have to put it in historical context, meaning that African people did not first come to this land we call the United States of America, conquered and shackled and chained by Europeans. This was our land stolen from us. One of the original names of this land was called Turtle Island. This was our land stolen from us. Now, this does not mean that the transatlantic slave trade did not happen. Yes, it did. But we have to understand a chronology of history leading up to the transatlantic slave trade happening, starting right around 1440 with the Portuguese getting involved in it. And we have to understand the 800-year occupation of Europe by the Africans known as the Moors, who go into the Iberian Peninsula, today known as Spain and Portugal, in 711 AD. And they're fighting against the Vandals and the Visigoths, okay? And it was the Vandals and the Visigoths who crushed the western portion of the Roman Empire in 476 AD, which cast Europe into the Dark Ages. It's going to be the Africans known as the Moors who take the teachings from ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt, into Europe and bring Europe out of the Dark Ages. So we have to understand a chronology of that history and how this sets up European exploration. This sets up Columbus setting sail on his first of 4 voyages, August 3rd, 1492. When he set sail on the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. And January 2nd, 1492, the Moors lose control of the last stronghold in Spain, which was Grenada. So we have to, Professor Kaba Hiawatha Kamene, who you see in the Hidden Colors documentaries, in 1804, The Hidden History of Haiti, we're in the Black Friday documentaries together, and we're in the, from director Rick Mathis, and we're in the documentary together with, from director Raheem Shabazz, Elementary Genocide. And Professor Cobb is one of my teachers. He talks about how to understand the existence of something, you first must understand the pre-existence of existence. To understand the existence of something, you first must understand the pre-existence of existence. So when I do my presentations, my Kwanzaa presentations, I bring all this history and culture into the presentations. so we can put all of this in historical context. Okay. All right. So this is an example of how Kwanzaa helps to reconnect African Americans to African history and culture. And the film Black Panther does the same thing as well. Okay, how's everybody doing? We got Brother Abdul, Brother Quasi in Detroit. And once again, those in the Detroit area, I'll be at the last day of Kwanzaa, January 1st, 2019, 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. at the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History. The Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History. Come on out to that. Is free and open to the public. Bring the family. They'll bring it's kid friendly. There's edutainment. There's African dance, African drumming. They have a whole program. The Shrine of the Black Madonna is the group that is sponsoring and organizing the last day of Kwanzaa, Imani, which means faith. Okay, so you can visit the website of the Charles H. Wright Museum, theright.org, for more information. And I'll be there. I'll be in the African marketplace, so I'll have a vendor table. Once again, I've been there 4 days. So come on out, and you can circulate your dollars with African American owned businesses also. We'll have our DVD lectures there. We have a lot of them on sale for $5 also. All right, so we just posted that information. You come meet me, ask questions, etc. All right. Okay, how's everybody doing? Hopefully you're having a good Kwanzaa. Okay, and it's important. You know, one of the reasons why Kwanzaa is from December 26th through January the 1st is so we can take these principles into the new year and practice them 365 days a year. The goal is not to be super black for 7 days and then to go back being a Negro for the rest of the year. The goal is to take these principles into the new year and practice them 365 days, okay? All right. And we'll post this link again here also. This is for my latest presentation. It's on DVDs, 4 of my Kwanzaa presentations. It's called From Kwanzaa to Wakanda, Reconnecting African Americans to African Culture for Self-Empowerment. That's at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com right now. We have that on DVD and digital download. It's only $10. There's 4 Kwanzaa presentations there. All right, so let's continue here. Okay, let me pull up this slide. Let me turn on the share just a second. Okay, so I'm talking about 5 fundamental activities of traditional African first fruit harvest festivals. And a lot of people know about the Nguzo Saba, but they don't know this information, okay? And I've done Kwanzaa presentations for the last 5 years, so I've done a lot of research on it, and I read Dr. Karenga's book dealing with Kwanzaa and the history of it, okay? So when we deal with the third fundamental activity of traditional African first fruit celebrations, first fruit festivals, is celebration. And celebration is a time of celebration of the good of life and of existence, the good of family, community, and culture. Because remember, Kwanzaa celebrates family, community, and culture. The good of the awareness and the ordinary. In a word, the good of the divine, natural, and social. Okay. The 4th fundamental activity of traditional African first fruit festivals. Okay, so these are 5 things that traditional African first fruit festivals have in common that were traditionally practiced on the continent of Africa. The 4th activity is recommitment. Recommitment, a time of recommitment to our highest cultural ideas in our ongoing effort to always bring forth the best of African cultural thought and practice, a time of recommitment to our highest cultural ideas in our ongoing effort to always bring forth the best of African thought and practice. And see, this is why I know, people will talk about we want equality. And yes, all people, people should be treated equally, okay? And I understand that. But for African Americans, our goal should not be to be equal to Europeans. This is no disrespect to Europeans. But when we understand our history, and we understand history going back tens of thousands of years, our goal should be to ascend to the level of achievement of our ancestors. For instance, if you look at Asians, right? Asian Americans consistently outperform white people on standardized tests that white people make for their own children to pass. Asian Americans consistently outperform white Americans on standardized tests that white people make for their own children to pass, ACT, things like this. Asian Americans have the highest median household income, okay? And then also about 49% of Asian Americans have at least a bachelor's degree compared to about 30% of the overall population. They have a higher attainment when it comes to college degrees than white people, than white Americans, okay? So if Asian Americans were trying, now this is no disrespect to anybody, but let's look at the statistics. If Asian Americans, if their goal was to be equal to white people, they would have to lower their standards. This is not attacking anybody, but we can look at the statistics and see this, okay? So when it comes to African Americans, even though we don't want I understand we're against discrimination. I understand we're against police brutality and things like this. But a lot of times when we talk about equality, even though we want equal rights, the goal should be to ascend to the level of achievement of our ancestors. But you have to understand African history and understand, Ghana and Songhai and Mali and the University of Sankore and the city of Timbuktu, the University of Janneh. Understand the teachings that the Moors took into Europe to understand what our ancestors had before our history was interrupted by the transatlantic slave trade and colonialism and European invasions and Arab invasions, because Arabs were involved in the Arab slave trade of African people in East Africa thousands of years before. That goes back to about 8th century AD. Okay, so this is no disrespect to anybody, but when we talk about equality and equal rights, then we can become distracted if we don't understand our history and understand the level that we need to get back to, the level we need to rise to get back to, which was the level our ancestors were on. And when you look at Freemasonry, the foundation of Freemasonry is coming from the teachings in ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt, okay, in the lodges, in the temples. And these are the teachings that the Moors, the African Moors, are taking into Europe. All right, so let's continue here. So Abdul said, why is Kwanzaa spelled with 2 A's at the end? The second A in Kwanzaa refers to American, okay? The second A in Kwanzaa refers to American in reference to African Americans. That's why Kwanzaa is spelled with 2 A's. That's what that's for. It's like just like Africana Studies, okay? Africana Studies is in reference to African American, okay? That's why it's called Africana. Africana Studies is in reference to African Americans, us here. That's why Kwanzaa has 2 A's. Okay, we got Maya, some other people watching here. Okay, share this broadcast. All right, so let's continue here. Okay, so then also the 5th fundamental activity of traditional African first fruit celebrations. Well, the 5th one is reverence. I did recommitment. Recommitment, a time of recommitment to our highest cultural ideas in our ongoing effort to always bring forth the best of African culture, thought, and practice. The 5th one is reverence. Reverence. A special time for the creator and creation in thanks and respect for the blessings, bountifulness, and beauty of creation. Okay, and I usually in my presentations when I talk about this, I usually say whatever name you may call the creator, creatress force, whether it's Amen or Amen Ra or Olodumare or God or Jesus or properly Yeshua, because the letter J didn't exist to 1630 AD. And if you look up the word Jesus in the dictionary, it takes you back to the Hebrew Yeshua, Allah, Chukwu, whatever term you use for that creator, creatress force. And contrary to popular belief by uninformed critics of Kwanzaa, like Reverend Jesse Lee Peterson, Google Reverend Jesse Lee Peterson if you want a really good laugh. Kwanzaa does honor the creator, creatress, but it does not prescribe to a certain religion. Okay, for all practical purposes, African people traditionally had spiritual systems as opposed to religions. Okay, for all practical purposes, African people traditionally we had spiritual systems as opposed to religions. One basic way to understand this is that spirituality teaches you how to think, and religion tells you what to think. Spirituality teaches you how to think. Religion tells you what to think. Spirituality that African people had connected them to that supreme force, but it awakened the power of the creator that was inside you. Whereas when we look at European Christianity, for instance, you have to go through an intermediary. You have to go through the Pope or have to go through Jesus Christ or what have you to get to the creator. Okay, it did not focus on awakening the power of the creator inside of you. Okay, the ka rest, the rising of the spirit. This is where the term Christ comes from. Christ, Christos, which is Greek, Christos, which is Greek, ka rest, the rising of the spirit, K-A-R-S-T. This gets back to traditional African spiritual systems. And if you look at my beat up copy of Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization by Tony Browder, and also people, for more information dealing with this type of information, read Introduction to African Religion by John S. M. Beatty. Introduction to African Religion by John S. M. Beatty, which deals with a better understanding of traditional African spiritual systems, okay? And understanding traditional African spiritual systems comes out of a people's cosmology. And cosmology deals with understanding the universe as an orderly system and the role that you play in that universe, right? What is your purpose here? What's your role here? Are you here to dominate all living things? Are you here to have control over the mineral wealth and the land and to exploit it for personal gain? Are you here to pollute the rivers and the oceans? Are you here to destroy the ozone layer? Are you here to dominate nature? Or do you understand that you are part of nature? That comes from a people's cosmology, okay? And the cosmology, their understanding of the universe as an orderly system and also the role they play in that comes from their culture. All right, so if we look at, just very quickly here, if we look at pages 193 and 194 of Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization by Tony Browder, Browder talks about the difference between African spiritual systems, especially coming out of ancient Kemet, and Christianity. And he talked about how historically the majority of Europeans in Europe were poor and ignorant, and only the most fortunate men, noblemen, lords, scribes, and various religious leaders were provided with an education. Okay, so you may look at maybe say only 10% of the European population, because even when the Moors go in to Spain and Portugal in 711 AD, and they go in, they're in Europe, about 85 to 90% of Europeans are illiterate. Okay, about 85 to 90% of Europeans were illiterate. Okay, so of this group, an even smaller number knew how to read or write. So we may just say maybe 1%, right? The top 1% possibly only knew how to read and write. The dogma, now this may go outside the circumference of some people's awareness. Just because you disagree with it or don't like it or never heard it before does not mean it's not true. It just means you have to do some research to understand what I'm talking about. The dogma of Christianity was readily available for the masses of people, okay? While the educated elite studied the ancient teachings, which were also called gnosis or true knowledge. The gnosis or true knowledge. The newly emerging schools of Hermetic, Neoplatonic, and Gnostic thought, Gnostic, Gnostic thought in Europe, were loosely based on the Nile Valley principles of education, which were designed to awaken within an individual knowledge of self. These are, so what these Europeans, what the ruling elite are studying are a watered down version of teachings coming out of ancient Kemet. While they're giving the masses of poor, ignorant, illiterate Europeans Christianity, the ruling elite are studying teachings coming from our ancestors. So the newly emerging schools in Hermetic, Neoplatonic, and Gnostic thought in Europe were loosely based on the Nile Valley principles of education, which were designed to awaken within an individual knowledge of self. This knowledge of self led to an awareness of the powers of God, the creator, the creatress force, which exists within man as expressed in the myths of Asar, Aset, and Heru, who the Greeks called Osiris, Isis, and Horus, known as the first Holy Trinity. And Aset given birth to Heru by a virgin birth, Heru born on December 25th. These are the original stories of the Immaculate Conception, the Adoration, the virgin birth, all this. This comes out of ancient Kemet. That story goes back to at least 3300 BC in ancient Nubia, okay? And Browder talks about that on, was that page 94, 95? Yeah, page 94 and 95. He deals with that. The story of Asar, Set, and Heru is the first story in the recorded history of man of a holy royal family, the Trinity, Immaculate Conception, Virgin Birth, and Resurrection. Evidence of this Trinity is known to have existed in ancient Nubia, or Ta-Nehesi Ta-Seti, which I just talked about because first fruit harvest festivals go back to ancient Nubia. Okay, this is the foundation of Kwanzaa. But evidence of this Trinity is known to have existed in ancient Nubia as late as 3300 BCE, before the Common Era or before Christ, as late as 3300 BCE in ancient Nubia. Carved on the walls of the Temple of Luxor, circa 1380 BCE, around 1380 before Christ, or BCE, before the Christian era, or it can mean before the Common Era, are the scenes that depict the Annunciation, the Immaculate Conception, the Virgin Birth, the Adoration, coming out of ancient Kemet, because you have a retelling of these stories adapted to various people's cultures with their names on it, their ethnicity, and you have an adaptation of these stories in Christianity put into the Bible with the Mary and Jesus, etc., the Holy Spirit, things like this. Okay, so read pages 94 and 95 of Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization by Tony Browder. You can also read Christianity Before Christ by Dr. John G. Jackson, because Dr. John G. Jackson goes deep into this also. You can read Christianity Before Christ by Dr. John G. Jackson, okay? This is an old copy, man. I've had this. When did I get this? So I usually write the dates in here. I got this in 1994. Got this December 31st. Damn, it's the anniversary. I got this December 31st, 1994. I usually write the dates in that I get the books so I can look back and see. Okay. So So I got that New Year's Eve, 1994. Okay, what was it 24 years ago? All right. Let's go back to page 193. Page 193 of Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization by Tony Browder. Okay. Page 193. Okay, so this knowledge of self led to an awareness of the powers of God which exist within man as expressed in the myths of Asar, Osset, and Heru, who the Greeks called Osiris, Isis, and Horus. This philosophy was in direct conflict with Christianity. This philosophy of awakening the power of the Creator creates force inside of you and achieving knowledge of self, the Ka-rest, the rising of the spirit. That was in direct conflict with Christianity. Because Christianity, now this is not an attack on anybody, but forming Christianity, they took fragments from the periphery of traditional African spiritual systems, as Professor James Small talks about, okay? This philosophy was in direct conflict with Christianity, which taught that man was conceived in sin, S-I-N, and that salvation could only be gained through Jesus the Christ, the Pope, or other accepted intermediaries, which took the power away from you and your direct connectedness to the Creator. You have to go through another intermediary. And then we know the Catholic Church was coming to existence in the 11th century AD, mid 11th century AD, around 1050, 1052, something like that. We know they're going to create something called purgatory, which is another way to extort money from people. And with purgatory, with that, what they said was, okay, when grandma, grandpa dies, they don't directly go to heaven. They go to purgatory. And that was, they go to purgatory for a period of time, and this, their souls are tortured and things like this. And the more money the family donates to the Catholic Church, right, the harder the priests and all them pray for grandma and grandpa's soul, and they get released from purgatory faster. Purgatory was a way for the Catholic Church to extort money from the people, okay? And then they're going to find out right around the time when you read Christopher Columbus and the African Holocaust, Slavery and the Rise of European Capitalism. But that's John Henry Clark. He talks about when the First Crusade takes place around 1095, 1096. It's late 11th century AD. Europeans were starting to realize that purgatory was a fraud. And that's when the First Crusade hit, okay? It was kind of distracted them. But that was a way, the purgatory was a way to extort more money from poor, ignorant people who were illiterate and couldn't even read the Bible that the church is telling them is the word of God. But nowhere in the biblical text does it state that the Bible is the word of God. This is not an attack on the Helios Biblos, the Sun Book, the Holy Bible, because you look up Holy Bible, it takes you back to Helios Biblos, Helios, which means sun, S-U-N. There's not an attack on that, but nowhere in the biblical text does it state that the Bible is the word of God. So this philosophy was in direct conflict with Christianity, which taught that man was conceived in sin and that salvation could only be gained through Jesus, the Christ, the Pope, or other accepted intermediaries. Okay? All right. And then he talks about the conflict between a British slave named Patrick, who was sent into Ireland in 432 AD by Pope Celestine I to convert the Irish and the Druids to Christianity. And in the name of the Christian church, Patrick killed thousands of Druids, right? Because what they were teaching, the Druids were dealing with a watered down version of teachings coming from ancient Kemet. They were dealing with a watered down version of teachings coming from ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt, and it conflicted with Christianity. So Patrick dies on March 17th, about 462 AD. And his feast day is March 17th. And it's known as St. Patrick's Day. So when you study what people are celebrating when they celebrate St. Patrick's Day, they're celebrating a man who killed thousands of Druids. And then they forced Christianity on the Irish and the Latin language, because this was Ireland became a colony of Rome. This is under the Roman Empire at this time, 432 AD. This is before the fall of the western portion of the Roman Empire, which happens in 476 AD, when it's attacked by the Vandals and the Visigoths. So this goes back to Dr. Shaka Musa Barashango, African people and European holidays and mental genocide. And most of us, don't understand the history of these holidays we've been taught to celebrate. And so I don't beat up on our people. I said this in my presentation Thursday, December 27th, Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History. I don't beat up on our people who celebrate Christmas, who celebrate St. Patrick's Day, because I understand the program. And then we're all going through a 12-step process recovering from the side effects of white supremacy and racism. We're all going through a 12-step process recovering from that. I understand that. But we have to understand, we have to reclaim African history and culture, which gives us our VIPs, our values, our interests, and our principles, as Dr. Leonard Jeffries and Professor James Small correctly teaches. And we have to study the history of these holidays we've been taught to celebrate and see if they fall in line with our values, our interests, and our principles based upon an African-centered understanding of the world. Okay, so let's continue here. So reverence, we're talking about reverence. Okay, so that's the fifth fundamental activity of traditional African first fruit celebrations. Okay, and we also have to keep in mind that African people introduced God consciousness and spirituality to the world. The first concept of a supreme being, deity, or God came from African people. And I'm referencing an article I wrote back December 25th, 2015. Kwanzaa reconnects African Americans to African culture for self-empowerment. You can read my article at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. And we posted it on our fan page of the African History Network. So I post each day of Kwanzaa as well. Okay, let's look at this quickly here. How's everybody doing? All right. Okay, so we have Vi Mines, we have Quincy, we have Brother Abdul, Brother Quasi. If you like this type of information, also be sure to visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We have our latest DVD presentation. There's 4 presentations on there, 4 of my Kwanzaa presentations, from Kwanzaa to Wakanda, reconnecting African Americans to African culture for self-empowerment. Okay, so very quickly here, if we look at some of the African roots of Kwanzaa, right? Some of the African roots of Kwanzaa. In ancient Kemet, the festival was called Pert En Men, and I've seen another spelling where it's EM instead of IN, but Pert En Men, or the coming forth of men, which was seen as a reaffirmation, okay, a reaffirmation of the harmonious interlocking of the divine, natural, and human or social. Now, among the Zulu or the Amazulu, it was called Umkosi, and this was a celebration that lasted for 7 days, right around the time of about December 26th through January the 1st. Among the Swazi, it was called Inkwala. Among the Matabele, Inkswala. Among the Ashanti, okay, of Ghana, it had various names. Among the Yoruba, various names depending on the region, okay, like Oro Olufin or Odun Ijesu. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce that, but those are Yoruba words, I can tell. The Ashanti and Yoruba festivals are usually referred to as the New Yam Festival, Y-A-M, the New Yam Festival, which is the time of the harvesting of the first yams. Now, even though these festivals have various names and are from different African societies or nations, they all focused around the harvesting of the first fruits and have similar values and practices, okay? So once again, read The African American Holiday of Kwanzaa, a celebration of family, community, and culture by Dr. Maulana Karenga. Okay, it's an excellent, excellent book that goes deep into this history, the traditional African cultural practices, and this helps to, reconnect us to African history and culture. All right. And Bantu Stephen Biko, one of our great South African freedom fighters, He taught us that the most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. The most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. Now, in the 1987 movie Cry Freedom, he was portrayed by Denzel Washington, okay? Bantu Stephen Biko. All right, so when we look at quickly, and you know, when we look at the film Black Panther, right? The film Black Panther helps reconnect us to African history and culture. We know the Black Panther character was created in 1966 by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby for Marvel Comics. And the Black Panther first appeared in issue number 52 of the Fantastic Four comic book, volume 2 of issue number 52 of the Fantastic Four comic book. He was introduced as a sensational Black Panther. And he was first time we saw an African superhero like this, right? And he defeats the Black Panther in their own comic book, okay? He defeats the Black Panther in their own comic book. And he talks about how he's probably the richest man in all of the world, in the Marvel Comics universe, right? Well, the richest man in the history of the world was Mansa Musa. And even the History Channel acknowledges this, because the History Channel, their official website, history.com, they have an article, this 14th century African emperor remains the richest person in history. This 14th century African emperor remains the richest person in history. That article came out March 19th, 2018, a little more than a month after the Black Panther film came out, February 16, 2018, okay? And they talk about how Mansa Musa became the ruler of the Mali Empire in 1312 AD, taking the throne after his predecessor, Abubakar II, for whom he had served as deputy, went missing on a voyage he took by sea to find the edge of the Atlantic Ocean. Mansa Musa's rule came at a time when European nations were struggling due to raging civil wars and a lack of resources. Raging civil wars and a lack of resources. During that period, the Mali Empire flourished thanks to ample natural resources like gold and salt. So Europe, during this period of time, 14th century, 1312 AD, Europe is in the Dark Ages, okay? The Moors are all throughout Europe, basically, by this point. And the bubonic plague, the Black Death, is going to hit in 1347 AD. And from 1347 to 1400, Europe loses between 1/4 to 1/3 of their population, between 25 million and 75 million. Europe is ravaged. So when they're setting sail, when the Portuguese are setting sail, when the transatlantic slave trade starts, and they're finding these new lands, especially with Columbus, because Columbus and his four voyages finds these new lands, uncovers these new lands, the Bahamas, Jamaica, Puerto Rico, Honduras, Cuba, Panama, right? And one of the things so they're looking for gold and silver and spices. They're trying to rebuild Europe. They're looking for gold and silver that they can trade, looking for spices they can trade. But they're also looking for another source of sugar. Because the Moors are going to introduce sugar into Europe, either 9th or 10th century. They introduced sugar and cotton into Europe, between 9th and 10th century. And Dr. Jose Pimenta Bay talks about this in one of his lectures, either The History of the Moors in Spain or The Decline of Moorish Power in Spain. We have some clips of his lectures at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. He also has an essay in the book, Golden Age of the Moor, as well. And I have that book somewhere around here, edited by Dr. Ivor Van Sertima, Golden Age of the Moor, okay? And also, these are all some of the books we use as reference in the online courses that I teach. Ancient Kemet, the Winter Solstice. No, not that one. That's a lecture. Yeah. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Okay, that's a 14-hour 7-session online course that I teach, and it's all on demand. It's at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. So these are some of the books we use as reference in the online course as well. And I reference them in some of my lectures also. But Golden Age of the Moor, edited by Dr. Ivan Van Sertima. Okay, this is a hell of a book, and he has this book has essays from many of our scholars dealing with the history of the Moors during the medieval time. Okay, Runoko Rashidi, Dr. Jose Pimenta Bay, Jan Carew, Dr. John G. Jackson, who wrote Christianity Before Christ. So this is a deep book right here. Golden Age of the Moor, edited by Dr. Ivan Van Sertima. I was looking at this bookmark here. Okay, when did I get this book? I got this book 2008 because this bookmark is from 2007. It's a play. It's a play with Lisa Ray and Lisa Ray, Kenya Moore, and Blue Cantrell. I mean, we don't even hear from Blue Cantrell anymore. This thing's from 2007. And I went to high school with Kenya Moore. We both came out of Cass Tech in '89 from Detroit. So I knew Kenya Moore back in the day. Shout out to Kenya. She just had a baby. Congratulations. I haven't talked to her in a couple of years. We talked a little bit on Twitter. Okay, so let's continue. How's everybody doing? Let's continue here. And we'll post a link here for the online courses that I teach also. We have them all on demand. We have them in a bundle pack, actually. It's a 10-course online bundle pack. And it includes ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. So you can watch from around the world. It's on demand. Watch as many times as you want to. And it also includes great African women in history, the mothers of civilization. Includes an online class I did dealing with the film Black Panther and some other things also, okay? So that's on sale, $60 right now, regularly $130. African-American business owners, hey, post the name of your business here on the thread of the broadcast, and you can email us at customerservice@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com to find out how to advertise, how you can advertise on the audio podcast of our radio show, the African History Network show, which we do Sunday nights, and also some of the broadcasts we do throughout the week. We take your 30-second and 60-second audio commercial, put it into our audio podcast. We're on 6 different podcast platforms: Castbox, iTunes, TuneIn, Acast, FM Player. In each episode, we reach thousands of people across the country. Okay, so email us, customerservice@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com for more information. All right, how's everybody doing? Okay, so this is some of the background information on Kwanzaa that's not talked about a lot when we have Kwanzaa celebrations. And when we look at the word Wakanda, Wakanda is a real word. Wakanda is in the Native American, Omaha and Ponca languages. It's in the Sioux Indian language. It means possesses secret powers, possesses secret powers. Wakanda, even though it's a fictitious place, Wakanda is not a made-up word, okay? And we know also that Kiswahili, which is the language used for Kwanzaa, and the Nguzo Saba, the 7 days of Kwanzaa, the 7 principles of Kwanzaa, etc. Kiswahili is a Bantu language, okay? And we know that Wakanda is a Bantu word also. Wakanda is related to Rwanda and Uganda. And also the word Kanda, K-A-N-D-A, Kanda is a Kikongo word, and Kikongo is a Bantu language also. But very quickly, what is Bantu? Bantu languages are a group of some 500 languages belonging to the Bantoid subgroup of the Benue Congo branch of the Niger Congo language family. The Bantu languages are spoken in a very large area, including most of Africa, from southern Cameroon eastward to Kenya and southward to the southernmost tip of the continent, which includes South Africa. 12 Bantu languages are spoken by more than 5 million people, including Rundi, Rwanda, Shona, Xhosa, or isiXhosa is actually isiXhosa. and Zulu or Amazulu, okay? Swahili or Kiswahili, which is spoken by 5 million people as a mother tongue and some 30 million people as a second language, is a Bantu lingua franca, important in both commerce and literature. And it's estimated really that about 50 million people speak Kiswahili, okay? Now, isiXhosa, which is a Bantu language also, is the language spoken in the film Black Panther. So the language that T'Challa is speaking to his father, T'Chaka, and speaking to General Okoye and Nakia, that's isiXhosa, okay, which is spoken in South Africa. And that was a language that Nelson Mandela spoke also. Nelson Mandela was a Xhosa man. So we see the film Black Panther, just like Kwanzaa. The film Black Panther helps to reconnect African Americans to African history, African culture, African language, African spiritual systems as well. All right. So we see these similarities. These are some of the things I dealt with in my presentation, and I talk about this in my presentation dealing with the film Black Panther also. Okay, and then we have those lectures in a bundle pack, and we also have them available in digital download. We actually have a Black Panther 8 digital download bundle pack, which includes 3 of my lectures dealing with the film Black Panther and 5 other presentations. That's on sale $50 right now at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, and that's on digital download. And we have a bundle pack for the DVDs also dealing with the film Black Panther. Okay, so let's continue here. But the movie Black Panther is much deeper than many people think. Okay, it's very deep, and and you have to understand some of the history of the Black Panther comic book also. So I did months of deep research. I read over 100 articles dealing with the film Black Panther and the comic book. I watched the movie. I went to go see the movie twice. I actually paid to go see the movie. I watched the movie twice. I bought a book, the Ultimate Black Panther Guide from Marvel Comics, that dealt with the 52-year history of a Black Panther comic book, so I could understand the characters and storylines and themes, things like this, because we see some of that represented in the film. Okay. All right. So, so that deals with the Bantu language. All right. Okay. So if we look at Ujamaa, right? If we look at the 4th principle of Kwanzaa, and just to break down the principles quickly here. Principles of Kwanzaa. First principle is Umoja, which means unity. Okay. And that's the first day of Kwanzaa. To strive for and maintain unity in the family, community, nation, and race. To strive for and maintain unity in the family, community, nation, and race. The second principle of Kwanzaa is Kujichagulia, self-determination. To define ourselves, name ourselves, create for ourselves, and speak for ourselves. Okay. Kujichagulia. The third day is Ujamaa, okay, which means collective work and responsibility, Ujamaa. And let's see, let's flip over here. I'll show this to you. Okay, and this is from the official Kwanzaa website, okay, the Nguzo Saba, the 7 principles. So we have Umoja, which means unity, Kujichagulia, self-determination, Ujamaa, collective work and responsibility, to build and maintain our community together and make our brothers and sisters' problems our problems, and to solve them together. Ujamaa, cooperative economics, to build and maintain our stores, shops, and businesses, and to profit from them together. So cooperative economics, Ujamaa, is different than just European capitalism, because cooperative economics deals with the collective, right, and benefits the community. It deals with the collective, where basically just European capitalism benefits the individual. Okay, it's a different concept. And we have a history of cooperative economics. We have a history of African-American co-ops, which I'm going to talk about in a minute briefly. 5th principle is Nia, which means purpose. Okay, like Nia Long, Nia, which means purpose. To make our collective vocation the building and developing of our community in order to restore our people to their traditional greatness, to restore our people to their traditional greatness. So restoring our people to our traditional greatness doesn't have anything to do with equality. That deals with ascending back to the level we were on before our history was interrupted by invasions and the transatlantic slave trade and colonialism. Sixth principle, Kuumba, which means creativity, and that's celebrated on New Year's Eve, December 31st. The sixth principle, Kuumba, to do always as much as we can in the way we can in order to leave our community more beautiful and beneficial than we inherited it. And the last principle, the seventh principle, Imani, which means faith, to believe with all of our heart in our people, our parents, our teachers, our leaders, and the righteousness and victory of our struggle. Okay? It's Imani, which means faith. All right. So you can check that out at official Kwanzaa website.com, official Kwanzaa website.com. All right, let's continue here. So I was speaking at Burt's Warehouse on Saturday, December 30th for fourth day of Kwanzaa, Cooperative Economics, right? And I dealt with Kwanzaa, Cooperative Economics, Reconnecting African Americans to African Culture and the History for Economic Empowerment. But what I did was I dealt with some of the history of African American co-ops. And there's a deep, rich history of us involved in African American co-ops. Let's see, stop share. Let's see, stop that. Okay. There's a deep, rich history. And many of our people don't know the history of African American co-ops. So back in about 2014, I interviewed a sister named Dr. Jessica Gordon Nimhard. Dr. Jessica Gordon Nimhard. And she wrote the book called Collective Courage, a history of African American cooperative economic thought and practice. Okay. And her book documents the history of African American co-ops through different periods of time, through slavery, during Reconstruction, during the Civil Rights Movement, during the Great Depression. So when we look at what are co-ops, okay, Dr. Jessica Gordon Nimhard talked about how the Black cooperative movement has always been parallel to the Black liberation and civil rights movements. We've mostly heard about the political side of the movement, but you can't name a major political leader that did not point to cooperatives as a pathway to freedom, okay? So what she's talking about is dealing with economic empowerment, but it's understanding economic empowerment from a traditional African cultural perspective, as opposed to a European business model, a European individualistic capitalistic model, okay? So when we look at Dr. W.B. Du Bois, right? Dr. W.B. Du Bois, speaking about economic empowerment, in 1935, he said, there exists today a chance for Blacks to organize a cooperative, a cooperative state within their own group by letting Negro farmers feed Negro artisans, okay, the craftsmen, the tradespeople, okay, things like this. By letting Negro farmers feed Negro artisans and Negro technicians guide Black home industries and Black thinkers. And Black thinkers plan this integration of cooperation, while Black artists dramatize and beautify the struggle. Economic independence can be achieved. To doubt that this is possible is to doubt the essential humanity and the quality of brains of Black people. All right, so this is Dr. W.B. Du Bois. So we oftentimes don't hear Du Bois dealing with economic empowerment. Okay, we hear about Du Bois fighting against Marcus Garvey, disagreeing with Booker T. Washington, but we don't hear about Du Bois dealing with economic empowerment. All right. And then let's see here. Okay. So I talked about the Free African Society. I talked about things like the Colored Merchants Association. And when we look at the Colored Merchants Association, okay, and also check out the article from news1.com. News1.com had a really good article entitled Stop Saying Black People Don't Support Each Other Economically. Stop saying Black people don't support each other economically. All right. And that's an article dealing with Dr. Jessica Gordon Nimhard's book, Collective Courage. And then they have some quotes from her also. They interviewed her as well. And she talked about writing her book. And it took about 15 years to write the book. All right. She said that, quote, in most places I've spoken, people think that we did not engage in cooperative economics. Okay. And she is a political economist and professor of community justice and social economic development at John Jay College in New York City. She said, my challenge was to prove that we did engage in cooperative economics. So she assumed that she would spend just a few years researching whatever cooperative she could dig up. But she said instead she was met with a history that spanned Black Americans' period of enslavement to the present day, and support for cooperatives from almost every major Black political leader along the way. Okay, so and she was asked a question, so why is this history relatively lost? Why has this history relatively been lost? And she said, quote, I'm not sure, but there's a lack of education about co-ops in general in our society. She said, we teach about capitalism and present capitalism as the only option. Also, often, whenever Blacks attempted to establish them, their efforts were sabotaged by white competitors and white supremacists. In many cases, it was through violence, but in others, it could be as simple as having your rent raised, banks denying your loan, or even being priced out of insurance. So if you watch the broadcast I did back on December 9th, dealing with the Black farmers' lawsuit against the soybean company, and they claimed they were sold fake soybeans. This is in Memphis, Tennessee. They claimed they were, some of them are in Memphis. They claimed they were sold fake soybean seeds. And they said that this wasn't, they felt this was an attempt to steal their land. Okay. So in 1920, there were about 925,000 African-American farmers. We owned 15 million acres of land. From 1920 to 1975, we lost 14 million acres of land, that 55-year period of time. And a lot of that land we lost through white domestic terrorism. We lost the land through loopholes in the law that we did not understand. And it's something called heirs property, HEIR''S, heirs property. And go back and watch that broadcast I did dealing with the farmers. And I'll pull up some of the articles here dealing with this. But this deals with the history of us losing the land. And oftentimes, if we had loans with white banks, the loans could be called in if we registered to vote, okay? If we organized and joined co-ops, etc. These were ways to break up that alliance oftentimes, okay? And so if you have a mortgage with a white bank for your farm, your loan could be called in. If you organized, if you join one of these groups, all right? So these were different tactics that were used to try to break up these types of alliances. Let me see, where are those articles? Because I was just looking at them, dealing with the farmers. All right. Yeah, but go back and watch that broadcast that I did because I went deep into the history. I was just looking at the those articles dealing with the black farmers. I probably had to pull one up because I have it bookmarked. All right, so here we go. So what she's talking about is the retaliation. And this is one of the ways that we lost our farms. This is one of the ways we lost our farmland. Because if we couldn't come up with the money, we could lose the farm. Sometimes we could come up with it, sometimes we couldn't. But a lot of times it would be different types of co-ops that would help us raise money to save our farms, pay the rent, etc. Okay. So and what happened is that African Americans went to white business schools and got degrees in business and MBAs, but they're learning white business principles. They're learning European business principles and forgot about our history of cooperative economics, forgot about the co-ops. So then that next generation, and like people today, African Americans today going to business school, or those who graduated in the 90s and the 2000s, even the 80s, most of them know nothing about this history. Okay, my degree's in business administration. I graduated in '94 from Wayne State's Business School. We did not learn about the history of African Americans and co-ops. Okay, we learned white business principles. And understanding African American history, culture, things like this, that largely does not work for us. But if we don't understand who we are, going back to Black Panther, show him who you are, show them who you are. Before you can show them who you are, you have to know who you are. So when we understand the fourth principle of Kwanzaa, Ujamaa, cooperative economics, it's a very, very deep history going back to cooperative economics on the continent of Africa and taking those principles, those concepts into the Caribbean and bringing them here as well to this country. Okay, but a people's history and culture teaches them how to deal with the problems of the past in the present and the future to meet the needs of the community once again. Okay, so this is why we have to tap into that history of how we dealt with these problems historically. Historically, the solution was not going to white banks for financing. Some of us had to do that, but that's not the majority of how we dealt with this. Okay, let's pull this up again. A people's history and culture teaches them how to deal with the problems of the past in the present and the future to meet the needs of the community. And once again, Kwanzaa helps to answer the question of who are you, who are we? It helps to reconnect African Americans to our history and culture. So does the film Black Panther. Okay, so if we look at just a couple examples here, and read this article dealing with the Black farmers. Black farmers group gets okay to move ahead with class action suit on fake seeds. This is from the Commercial Appeal, which is a Memphis, Tennessee publication. Black farmers group gets okay to move ahead with class action suit on fake seeds. Okay. And go back and watch the broadcast that I did at our Facebook fan page, The African History Network. Click on videos, and you can go back. I did that December 9th, and I rebroadcasted a couple times also. And it's also on our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP on YouTube. If you like this type of information, you can also donate to the African History Network, paypal.me, paypal.me/the AHN show. And or if you don't have a PayPal account, go to AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, click on the yellow donate button. That helps us to keep doing the research, keep broadcasting our radio show, keep doing the broadcast, pay the bills, etc. All right. PayPal.me/the AHN show. And then also you can register for the online courses that I teach that are all on demand and include the 14-hour 7-session online course, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. And that's also at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com on the homepage. All right, so what Dr. Jessica Gordon Nembhard is talking about, who's the author of Collective Courage, A History of African American Cooperative Economic Thought and Practice, she's talking about how a history of African Americans being involved in cooperative economics is not taught to us, and is definitely not taught in general. It's definitely not taught in the business schools. Now, maybe at some HBCUs, they may teach us some. I went to a predominantly white institution. I didn't go to the HBCU, okay? She said, quote, "We teach about capitalism and present capitalism as the only option. Also, often when African Americans attempted to establish them, the co-ops, their efforts were sabotaged by white competitors and white supremacists. In many cases, it was through violence, but in others, it could be as simple as having your rent raised, banks denying your loan, or even being priced out of insurance." Okay. She said the Black cooperative movement has always been parallel to the Black liberation and civil rights movements. We've mostly heard about the political side of the movement, but you can't name a major Black political leader that did not point to cooperatives as a pathway to freedom. And I gave you the example there of Dr. W.B. Du Bois. All right. Okay, so if we look at the Colored Merchants Association, right? So the Colored Merchants Association was founded in 1928, and they were created by the National Negro Business League, okay? The National Negro Business League of Montgomery, Alabama in 1928 created the Colored Merchants Association. And this was a cooperative organization of African American grocery stores. And the purpose of the organization was to reduce the operating costs of African American retailers through mutual support, cooperative buying, and collective marketing. Mutual support, cooperative buying, and collective marketing. And this was during a harsh market dominated by white-owned chain stores, okay? And the Colored Merchants Association model was markedly successful. Associated stores reported increases in business and profits. So in the early 1900s and going into the 1920s, you had a rise in the chain stores, such as Sears and Roebuck, F.W. Woolworth. You have Kresge, S.S. Kresge. You have the Great Atlantic and Pacific Tea Company. And they grow a lot in the early 1900s, and they give competition to African-American owned businesses, especially African-American owned grocery stores. And the chain stores were able to, they buy in bulk, so they're able to get economies of scale, lower prices, and pass those lower prices on to their customers. BlackDen.com has an article entitled How Black Independent Store Owners in the 1920s Created a Movement to Stay Competitive. How Black Independent Store Owners in the 1920s created a movement to stay competitive, okay? And this article talks about how for 2 months in the spring of 1929, a group of African-American grocery store owners in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, organized public lectures, meetings, exhibits, and food tastings that attracted large audiences and national attention, okay? And this was the Colored Merchants Association. And the grocery store owners were joining a new cooperative business called the Colored Merchants Association, which began in Alabama. On April 17th, 1929, they announced a local newspaper. They announced in a local newspaper an ambitious plan to create a movement looking towards the salvation of the Negro independent grocery stores. The salvation of the Negro independent grocery stores through cooperative buying and teaching the lesson of value and teaching the lesson and value of advertising. Okay. National Negro Business League leaders, and the National Negro Business League was created right around 1900 by Booker T. Washington. So the Colored Merchants Association comes out of this organization. All right. And we'll show you a picture of these very distinguished looking brothers here. This is a picture from 1904. Here, let's flip this back over. share that. Okay. So this is officers of the National Negro Business League in Indianapolis in 1904. But the Colored Merchants Association is founded in 1928 by the National Negro Business League. Okay. And we see Booker T. Washington there in the middle. You know, if there's ever like a big movie about Booker T. Washington, Dennis Haysbert, the Allstate man, he should play Booker T. Washington because he looks a lot like Booker T. Washington. Okay. All right. Let's continue here. So in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, right, in 1929, there was a city directory that listed 373 grocery stores, 373 grocery stores. African Americans own 128 of these 373 grocery stores. Okay, this is in 1929. Most cities that have a predominantly African American population today don't own 4 or 5 grocery stores. They don't even have 4 or 5 grocery stores owned by African Americans in general. Definitely don't have that here in Detroit. I think it's maybe 2 at best. All right, but this is what we had in 1929. Okay, so African Americans operated more than 30% of these 373 grocery stores in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, making up by far the largest group of Black businessmen in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And these stores also face new challenges because of the rise in the chain stores. And grocery stores are going to be one of the most popular stores we have because you have to eat. You have grocery stores and funeral homes. You have to eat and you have to die. All right. So some more information on the Colored Merchants Association. Let's see here. So hundreds of small independent grocery stores dotted downtowns and neighborhoods throughout southern cities and towns of the early 1900s. Most grocers, white and Black, owned one store that served the neighborhood where they lived. Customers walked daily to their neighborhood store to shop or phoned in orders for delivery. By the 1920s, however, new chain stores began to attract more and more customers with low prices and modern interiors. Okay, and let's see. So during the early 1900s, the number of grocery chains in the United States had doubled. These chains kept growing and adding stores. For example, the largest and most successful grocery chain, A&P, okay, Atlantic and the Great Atlantic and Pacific Tea Company, A&P, operated a few hundred stores in the Northeast during the first decade of the 20th century. It grew to more than 11,000 stores nationwide in the 1920s. A&P grew to more than 11,000 stores nationwide in the 1920s. With 15 locations in Winston-Salem, North Carolina in 1929, A&P owned more stores in that city than any grocer. So this is what the Colored Merchants Association was created to fight against. This was a type of cooperative. We have a long history of doing this. Okay, it wasn't adopting a European business model, a white business model that allowed our businesses to prosper. It was engaging in cooperative economics, which is an African principle. Okay, so because A&P ordered more numbers of an item than a single grocer did, wholesalers sold products to the chain at lower prices. The chain stores passed the savings along to the customer, selling many brand name products at a lower price than the independent grocer could afford. All right. A&P made sure that Winston-Salem customers knew about its bargains by advertising regularly in local newspapers. Okay. So the Colored Merchants Association is teaching them better strategies for marketing their products, advertising, etc., how to be more efficient, how to be more cost effective so they can compete with A&P and other chain stores. All right, now, African-American grocers in Montgomery, Alabama had decided to work together to compete. African-American grocers in Montgomery, Alabama had decided to work together to compete. A.C. Brown, the initial A.C. Brown, A.C. Brown, a successful grocer in that city for 20 years, persuaded 14 grocers to combine their buying power and place orders with wholesalers together. This way, they got lower prices to stock their stores. This cooperative, called the Colored Merchants Association, operated as a kind of voluntary chain. The idea was to pool money for buying products and advertising, and to educate African American merchants about modern business practices. Goals included increasing stores' profits by improving accounting methods, modernizing store interiors to provide a better shopping experience, and creating greater awareness of the buying power of African Americans. Now, this is something that every African American Chamber of Commerce should be doing across the country. This is something every African American Chamber of Commerce should be doing across the country. Okay, so check out this article from blackden.org, blackden.org, and there's another article also from ncpedia.org, also ncpedia.org, for more background information as well. Okay, then you have the Colored Farmers National Alliance and Cooperative Union, Colored Farmers National Alliance, Cooperative and Union. Okay, and when we look at the Colored Farmers National Alliance and Cooperative Union, this was probably the largest cooperative. Okay, because they had over 1.2. They had about 1.2 million members. All right, and let me pull up this article here just a second. Okay. Yeah, they had 1.2 million members. AtlantaBlackStar.com has a good article, 5 historic examples of cooperative economics that advance the Black community. And they talk about the Colored Farmers National Alliance and Cooperative Union. Now, this was formed in 1886 in Texas. And it only lasted 5 years, 1886 to 1891. But organizing this type of cooperative, right, especially as large as it was, this is something that was very dangerous. Okay, this was something that was very dangerous, and you could be physically attacked. They could try to kill you, etc. We know that you had there was a massacre of sharecroppers in Arkansas who were trying to unionize and get better wages. Okay, that was there's a forgotten massacre. There have been numerous articles written about this. The Daily Beast has one. America's Forgotten Mass Lynching. America's Forgotten Mass Lynching, when 237 people were murdered in Arkansas. This was in 1919. Okay, so 1919, you've heard me talk about the Red Summer before. This was the year after World War I ended. And in 1919, you have over 25 major race riots in this country. Okay, and in 1919, in the wake of World War I, Black sharecroppers unionized in Arkansas, unleashing a wave of white vigilantism and mass murder that left 237 people dead. Okay, so when we organize, we're going to have successes organizing, but when we organize, oftentimes we were attacked by white supremacy. Okay, let's see here. The visits began in the fall of 1918, just as World War I ended. At his office in Little Rock, Arkansas, attorney Ulysses S. Bratton, Bratton, listened as African-American sharecroppers from the Delta told stories of theft, exploitation, and endless debt. This is one of the reasons why we're organizing. We're organizing these cooperatives for economic empowerment, because we were being exploited by white supremacy. We were not being paid wages correctly. And then also you have white domestic terrorism, where our land is being stolen for those African Americans who were farmers, not sharecroppers, but were actually farmers. We're dealing with our land being stolen. We're dealing with being ran off of our land, being killed, and our land stolen. Things like this. And I dealt with that back on November 9th or December 9th, when I did the broadcast dealing with the farmer suing the soybean company. And I dealt with a history of how we lost 14 million acres of land, okay, in 55 years. Okay, so Ulysses S. Bratton listened, okay, as African-American sharecroppers from the Delta told stories of theft, exploitation, and endless debt, okay? A man named Carter had tended to 90 acres of cotton, only to have his landlord seize the entire crop and his possessions. From the town of Ratio, I guess it's pronounced Ratio, R-A-T-I-O, from the town of Ratio in Phillips County, Arkansas, an African-American farmer reported that a plantation manager refused to give sharecroppers an itemized account for their crop. Another sharecropper told of a landlord trying, quote, to starve the people into selling the cotton at his own price. They ain't allowing us down their room to move our feet except to go to the field, end quote. So no one could know it at the time, but within a year, these inauspicious meetings would lead to one of the most worst episodes of racial violence in U.S. history, initiated by whites. The violence, by any measure, a massacre, claimed the lives of 237 African Americans, according to a just released report from the Equal Justice Initiative. That's Attorney Brian Stevenson and the Equal Justice Initiative. And it's the Equal Justice Initiative that was behind the lynching museum and the lynching memorial in I think that was Birmingham, Alabama. I think that was, yeah, in Alabama. Okay, so the death toll, and I think was at Alabama, Mississippi. I think that was Alabama. And I've talked about that on my radio shows also. The lynching museum that opened up. Legacy Museum opens in Montgomery, Alabama, to highlight slavery and lynchings. Read the article from NBCnews.com. This is Alabama, Montgomery, Alabama. This is from April 28th, 2018. Okay, that just opened this year. Legacy Museum opens in Montgomery, Alabama, to highlight slavery and lynchings. That's NBCnews.com. We'll post this link here. So this all ties into our history, and the cooperatives, the African-American cooperatives, were one of the ways that we fought against white supremacy and racism. Okay, so we don't understand that history, right? And then we're more reliant now upon white banks to try to finance our businesses and fund our businesses. And we wonder why 95% of African-American owned businesses don't have any employees. That model largely does not work for us. That European business model largely does not work for us. Also read the article from Vice.com. Vice.com had an interview back in 2016 with Dr. Jessica Gordon Nimhard, who wrote the book Collective Courage. Name of this article is called How Black Co-ops Can Fight Institutional Racism. How Black Co-ops Can Fight Institutional Racism. We talked with Dr. Jessica Gordon Nimhard, an expert on cooperative economics, about the ways that Blacks can join together through a capitalistic enterprise and create social change. Okay, but it's a different type of capitalism. Okay, that's being talked about. So check that out also, Vice.com. Really good article there, good interview. Okay, so. And this ties right into Kwanzaa, ties right into our history. This ties into Ujamaa, cooperative economics, fourth principle of Kwanzaa. All right, so from the town of Ratio in Phillips County, Arkansas, a Black farmer reported that a plantation manager refused to give sharecroppers an itemized account for their crop. All right, now no one could know it at the time, but within a year, these inauspicious meetings would lead to one of the worst episodes of racial violence in U.S. history. Initiated by whites, the violence by any measure, a massacre claimed the lives of 237 African Americans, according to a just released report from the Equal Justice Initiative. The death toll was unusually high, but the use of racial violence to subjugate African Americans during this time was not uncommon. As the Equal Justice Initiative, EJI, observes, quote, racial terror lynching was a tool used to enforce Jim Crow laws and racial segregation, a tactic for maintaining racial control by victimizing the entire African American community, not merely punishment of an alleged perpetrator for a crime, end quote. Not merely punishment for an alleged perpetrator for a crime. This was a way to terrorize the entire African American community. Now, this was certainly true of the massacre in Phillips County, Arkansas. All right. Okay. So check out the rest of this article. This one here is from the dailybeast.com. I think Smithsonian Mag. I think they have an article. The official website of the Smithsonian Institute. I think they have an article dealing with this also. Okay. All right, so African-American business owners, hey, post the name of your business here on the thread of the broadcast, and email us at customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com, email us at customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com, customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com, and find out how you can advertise on the audio podcast of our show, the African History Network show, which we do Sunday nights, and some of the broadcasts we do throughout the week. Each episode, we're on 6 different podcast platforms. Each episode reaches thousands of people across the country and outside the country also. We have listeners around the world. And we take your 30-second or 60-second commercial. If you don't have one, we can record one for you, no additional charge. We take your 30-second and 60-second commercial, put into the audio podcast of our platform, of our podcast, and it helps you reach new customers, okay? All right, so customer service at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Okay, so when we look at the Colored Farmers National Alliance and Cooperative Union, they were founded in 1886 in Texas. Now, despite the fact that both African American and white farmers faced great difficulties due to the rising price of farming and the decreasing profits that were coming from farming, the protective organization known as the Southern Farmers Alliance, did not allow African Americans to join because of segregation. So African Americans were not allowed to join the white cooperative, okay? So they created their own. So a group of African American farmers decided to organize their own alliance to fill their need. The Colored Farmers National Alliance and Cooperative Union operated under fear and harassment by white farmers, but managed to operate several cooperatives in the late 19th century before having to disband, because this is very dangerous to organize like this, okay? Members of the CFACU shared agricultural techniques and innovations and coordinated cooperative efforts for planting and harvesting. The union promoted alliances between farmers and laborers and was active in local and regional politics in order to maintain rights for African Americans after Reconstruction. So Reconstruction is 1865 to 1877, right after Civil War ends. And this period of time here that the Colored Farmers Union existed is after Reconstruction. They existed 1886 to 1891. All right. So it's estimated that the CFACU had 1.2 million members and was the largest African American organization of its time. 1.2 million members. Now, this is at a period of time, there's only about 10 million or 11 million African Americans in the country. Okay. And they have 1.2 million in their organization. That's amazing. But that's not something usually taught about in our history classes. That's usually not something taught about in our business schools. Okay. And the white business schools definitely don't teach things like that. But when we study our history, right? When we study our history of economic empowerment, we study our history of entrepreneurship. Okay. Our strength came from cooperative economics. Our strength came from the co-ops. It did not come from copying white models of business. That's not where the strength came from. And then when we look at the SUSU system, SUSU, when we look at the SUSU system, that's straight out of West Africa taken into the Caribbean. Okay? So when we look at cooperative economics among African Americans, we're taking these principles from Africa, especially West Africa, and taking them throughout the diaspora. So in parts of West Africa and the Caribbean, an ancient version of cooperative economics exists called SUSU. As one of the oldest forms of microfinance in Africa, the practice is run by one of Africa's oldest financial groups, SUSU collectors. SUSU collectors. They run their businesses from kiosks in the marketplace and act as mobile bankers. Clients make low but regular deposits on a daily or weekly basis over the course of a month into a SUSU account. At the end of this period, the SUSU collector returns the accumulated savings to the client, but keeps one day's savings as commission. Okay? Let me just repeat this. Clients make low but regular deposits on a daily or weekly basis over the course of a month into a SUSU account. At the end of this period of time, at the end of the month, the SUSU collector returns the accumulated savings to the client, but keeps one day's savings as commission. SUSU collectors may also provide advances to their clients or rotate the accumulated deposits of a group between individual members. This is a traditional African way of financing businesses. Today, SUSU collectors provide many West Africans who would otherwise be denied credit the access to money they need to start up small venture projects that in many cases benefit the community as a whole. In the United States, Black immigrants from the Caribbean have enjoyed one of the highest economic growth rates using a form of the SUSU and leveraging this practice to establish successful credit unions. A credit union is a type of cooperative. But they're getting, so when brothers and sisters come here from the Caribbean, right? And we wonder why they're so prosperous and own businesses, being here just a small amount of time, is not because they went to white banks to get financing for the most part. And they have more of their history and culture intact for the most part than many African Americans do. And every ethnic group in America uses their history and culture to fight for scarce wealth, power, and resources. Every ethnic group in America they use their history and culture to fight for scarce wealth, power, and resources. All right, so we have to study this history and tap into this. If we look at the pyramid principle that Dr. Leonard Jeffries and Professor James Small teach us, two of my teachers, and you've heard, if you go to AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, click on listen to podcasts, you can listen to numerous interviews I've done with both of them. The foundation of the pyramid, now this is the pyramid of Khafre at Giza in Egypt, right? And last time I checked, Egypt is still in Africa. It's not in the fictional Middle East. It's still in Africa. But the foundation of the pyramid is African history and culture. And this gives us our VIPs, our values, our interests, and our principles. This influences our economic empowerment. But not just influencing our economic empowerment, it influences the type of businesses we have, how we engage in business. Okay, so the cooperative economics, Ujamaa, comes from our African history and culture. And our economic empowerment also influences our political empowerment, how we engage in politics, and understanding concepts of political self-defense, and understanding that politics impacts every aspect of our lives, from the water we drink to the food we eat to the air we breathe. Politics is the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources. The legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources. And politics is the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, their adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. Okay, so politics goes way beyond voting. I'm all for voting, but we have to vote strategically. And we have to vote for people whose policies best match up with what our issues are and our agenda. Okay, and then we have to understand after the election is over, the fight has just begun, because we stay engaged to push our agenda and to get the policies in the place that we need and want, but also to protect the policies that are already in place that we need and we want. This is a concept of political self-defense that I talk about, because we don't understand how to protect our gains, because we don't understand how to assess the gains that were made in the previous election. So oftentimes we vote based upon personality. We don't understand the concept of political self-defense and understand dealing with policies, not personalities or political affiliation. It's about the policies. And what we have to understand is that our taxpayer dollars pay the salaries of the elected officials, whether we vote for them or not. Cindy Hyde-Smith, that public hanging woman in Mississippi, taxpayer dollars pay for her salary, whether you voted for her or not. Our taxpayer dollars pay for the policies that are put in place, even the ones that are detrimental to us. So when Trump reversed President Barack Obama's initiative for to stop using privatized prisons for federal prisoners, as President Obama announced in August 2016, they announced that they would not renew contracts for privatized prisons, okay, for federal prisoners. Well, when Trump became president, he reversed that. Why? Because Core Civic and Geo Group, who were the two largest owner-operators of privatized prisons, and Core Civic used to be called Corrections Corporation of America, they donated almost $600,000 to Donald Trump's presidential campaign. So when he became president, he returned the favor and renewed the contracts for privatized prisons, which benefited them, caused a big increase in their stock prices, because they're both publicly traded stocks. They're both publicly traded stocks. Then when we follow the money and we look at, well, who's getting the contracts for the immigrant detention coming through the Mexican border and the detention of the children, the migrants coming through? Who's getting those contracts? WallStreetJournal.com, WSJ.com, July 2nd, 2018. Trump's immigrant detention plans benefit private prison operators. Trump's immigrant detention plans benefit private prison operators. Core Civic, Geo Group, Geo Group, both Trump campaign contributors, have become more reliant on ICE revenue in recent years. The Trump administration's new push for more federal detention facilities for immigrants or migrants awaiting asylum hearings or deportation has brightened the outlook for the country's two largest private prison operators. Tennessee-based Core Civic Inc. and Florida-based Geo Group had already been helped by higher federal spending on Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE. Now, the Trump administration is seeking $2.8 billion in the 2019 budget year to increase the number of beds in immigration detention centers to 52,000, which is made up of 49,500 for adults and 2,500 family beds, which is an increase from about 40,000 now, according to a spokeswoman. Stock shares in both companies rose in the month of June after ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, issued a notice that it may seek 15,000 new beds for families. So read this article, follow the money. Trump's immigrant detention plans benefit private prison operators. Well, they donated to his presidential campaign. Your taxpayer dollars pay for this, even if you are against privatized prisons. Politics is the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources, and the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, their adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. New York Times, June 21st, 2018, the billion-dollar business of operating shelters for migrant children. The billion-dollar business of operating shelters for migrant children. The business of housing, transporting, and watching over migrant children detained along the southwest border is not a multi-million-dollar business, it's a billion-dollar business. The nonprofit organization Southwest Key Programs, Southwest Key, K-E-Y programs, has won at least $955 million in federal contracts since 2015 to run shelters and provide other services to immigrant children in federal custody. Its shelter for migrant boys at a former Walmart supercenter in South Texas has been the focus of nationwide scrutiny. But Southwest Key is but one player in the lucrative, secretive world of the migrant shelter business. About a dozen contractors operate more than 30 facilities in Texas alone, with numerous others contracted for about 100 shelters in 16 other states. Follow the money. New York Times, June 21st, 2018, the billion-dollar business of operating shelters for migrant children. So check out that article. And then when you have Trump and Director of Homeland Security, Kirstjen Nielsen, talking about the migrants can claim political asylum if they come to the right ports, the right checkpoints. But when you look at what's going on, the Trump administration has Border Patrol blocking them at the legal checkpoints to claim political asylum, because political asylum is based upon international law that the U.S. was involved in crafting. International political asylum is not illegal. That's law. Vox.com, June 5th, 2018. Trump keeps making it harder for people to seek asylum legally. And there have been numerous articles written about this. The United Nations blasted the Trump administration over this also. Trump keeps making it harder for people to seek asylum legally. It's legal to seek asylum at an official border crossing, but border agents are blocking people from getting that far. June 5th, 2018. Check out that article also. All right. So when we deal with cooperative economics, it's more than just a principle for one day, okay, dealing with Kwanzaa. There's a deep, rich history that African Americans have to tap into and reclaim when it comes to cooperative economics, because largely European business models don't work for us. Our history is different. Our culture is different. So we have to tap into what has historically worked for us and reclaim that. All right, let's look at some of your comments here quickly. How's everybody doing? Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. You can listen to our audio podcasts. We have almost 900 of them connected to our YouTube channel. Listen to the African History Network show Sundays, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on 9:10 a.m. the Superstation. And we have the podcast. Listen to. We have the link at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. And then also we have the my latest presentation. It's 4 of my Kwanzaa presentations and 2 that I did in the past few days. From Kwanzaa to Wakanda, Reconnecting African Americans to African Culture for Self-Empowerment. From Kwanzaa to Wakanda, Reconnecting African Americans to African Culture for Self-Empowerment. And that DVD, that contains 4 Kwanzaa presentations, okay? And we have it on digital download also. Let's see here. All right. Let me share this quickly here. I thought I already did. Okay, so how's everybody doing? So hopefully you're going to Kwanzaa celebrations, the last day of Kwanzaa. And hopefully, if you don't normally celebrate Kwanzaa, hopefully you will start. Okay, let's see who we have here. Okay, so we have Michelle, Tamanika, Sharon, just a few of the people. Okay, how's everybody doing? So once again, those in the Detroit area, I'll be at the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History for the last day of Kwanzaa, Tuesday, January 1st, 2019, New Year's Day. It's 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. It's free and open to the public. Bring the family. Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History. And I'll be in the African marketplace. They have vendors there. You can come get gifts, because there's gifts for Kwanzaa. There's gift giving during Kwanzaa, usually the last day of Kwanzaa. And usually gifts are for the children, usually something educational. It could be something handmade. It could be something like a book, DVDs, what have you. But it's usually something educational. And it's free and open to the public. Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History. The Shrine of the Black Madonna is the organizer for the last day of Kwanzaa. And, you know, they'll have African dance, African drumming, presentations. It's a really, really good time. It's a really fun time. So come on out. Visit the vendor table of the African History Network. We'll have our DVD lectures there. We'll have some great sales going on also. All right. Okay, so look, hey, we have to get out of here. Remember, at the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right knowledge corrects wrong behavior. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. Remember, right knowledge corrects wrong behaviors. Not over till we win. Wakanda forever, and we'll talk to you next time. Peace.